start out by saying this was certainly a challenge. I'm glad I got here well over an hour early. Tim worked awful hard to try and figure out how to make this thing work, and I guess we kind of did. A little bit just to introduce myself. I started out fishing on Fall River when I was pretty young. My mom and dad, I was an only child, so wherever mom and dad went, I went. We were going up there to fish the Deschutes one time, and the upper Deschutes, and as a result of that, my dad had bought it was called a Higgins camper. It was a piece of crap. It folded out and it was all canvas. That's when we found out that I had asthma and other things. And so my mom spent most of the night with me trying to keep me alive for the night. And then she threatened my dad if he didn't sell it when we got home. So that's how we kind of ended up in Fall River that way. We also spent a lot of time up there because both my dad was very active in running Labrador Retrievers. And we always had a lab with us. We'd spend time up there, and to get started, my dad would give me $2.50 a day, and that would allow me to keep 2 fish and get a bottle of pop in the lodge. When I was turned loose, this was the cabin. Oh, I forget, this won't work up there. This was the cabin we always stayed in, and so Mom would cut me loose in the morning, and I'd be down there until she made me come in at night. And I had no idea what this whole thing of catch and release was. Personally had never heard that word before. So it was catch them, keep them, and eat them. And that black fly rod that is in my hand, my mom and dad bought that for me from, I don't know how much they paid for it, but it was from Montgomery Ward's. And I could literally beat somebody to death with it. It's so stiff in the butt. But that's how I kind of got into the fish in Fall River. This middle picture of me in the boat, there was 2 ponds up there, right in the property that the lodge owned. It was interesting that probably about, I'm going to say at least 60 years ago, the people that owned the lodge by the name of the Ranyards offered it to my dad. There was a lodge, I think 4 or 5 cabins, a trailer court, the 2 ponds. Indian Creek went up above this particular pond here, and it was a spawning area, and they offered it to sell it to him for $50,000. That might as well have been $5 million in those days. So needless to say, if my dad would have bought that, I'd still be living there. But that's the way it went. This is a picture of the lodge that we used to go into. It was a beautiful old lodge. It eventually burned down. This is inside the lodge, and behind that guy was a pop machine. And a lot of you guys, probably most of you, remember the pop machines where you put your money in and you had to do a round and about like that to get it out, you know. That's what that was. And we used to go in there at least one night while we were there, and they would fix a beautiful big steak dinner. And then this is actually a little bit better picture. That's when we first started going up there back in those days. So at some point in time, and I don't recall what time, but the Cronins and the Myers bought that property. The rumor is that the lodge burned down, and there's some discrepancies there as to how it burned down, but it did burn down. And so they've had that property. I don't think the Myers, any of them are around anymore. There's a few Cronins that are still around in the area, and they still have that property. You can't fish it because they've got it fenced off, so you can't get in to fish. So at any rate, when I was working for Warner Pacific College, I was a professor there for a number of years. And before anything, oh, by the way, there will be a test at the end. So I hope you guys have paper and pencil out. I'll hand out the blue books later. At any rate, I fish knowing every moment is a river is a gift. And I always tried to have some kind of a quote in there by somebody in all of my lessons that I taught at the college. And this just seemed to be the appropriate one for Fall River. So to begin with, a spring creek is nothing more than the water coming down. It comes out of a spring. It comes from underground. I don't believe that anybody actually knows exactly where it comes from, but it's up in the Mount Bachelor area somewhere. I've heard they've tried to trace it a couple times and have not had any success. It's almost always flat and smooth, just like Fall River. has very little change during the year. The temperature may go up a couple of degrees and down a couple of degrees. But other than that, it's going to be pretty much the same, and it is darn cold. I've tried back in my younger days when I was even really stupid, wading it barefoot or in tennis shoes, and I can tell you that was not a good idea. The rooted plants is characteristic of the rocks and stuff that are in there. That's really what makes up a spring creek, is something like that. Obviously, if you've been on the Metolius, it's almost a carbon copy of the Metolius. This is where the headwaters come out at. You can literally, the road is just up of that tree that kind of goes across, and the tree going this way. The road along there is just right above that. So you can drive up there. There's a guard station there that is now being rented if people want to camp or stay there. I don't know how much it costs, but you can stay right at the headwaters if you'd like. And this is what it looks like in the winter. I've found recently, for the most part, that fishing the winter is a whole lot better than the summer. There's too many people. It used to be, even 50 years ago, when I'd go up there with my friends from high school and we'd go up and camp up there, we could fish all weekend long and never see another person. You're lucky to get up there on a weekday and not see a lot of people nowadays. But this is a friend of mine, George Black, and he is fishing literally right, well, his line is probably on private property. He's just barely off, but it is one of the best fishing holes on the river. The man that lives on the other side is a very grumpy old man who yells at you, and I'm sure George got yelled at also. The man that lives on the other side happens to be a friend of mine, and so when I go up there, he used to be an ambassador with New Zealand or with the UK, and so I always go up and visit him. And every year I get there, I'm wondering, I don't know if he's going to be here this year or not, but if he is, I go in and I have a cup of tea with him and chit chat, and then I kind of at the end say, hey, mind if I fish for a little bit? And sometimes he says yes, and sometimes he says, no, I got somebody coming. So, but it's still a great, I mean, that right where he is at is really good fishing. This is just kind of a look at what it looks like in the winter. It's my wife up here. We used to do quite a bit of cross-country skiing there. I still do a lot of winter fishing. There's a nice trail. There's springs coming in right there. But I think, whoops, went too far. One of the biggest things that I think that's important, just not this river, but on all rivers that you fish, is you need to know what the rules that the fish have to live by. And they have to live, they have to eat. The general rule is that they have to take in more calories than they put out to get whatever they're eating. Otherwise, they get really skinny, and that doesn't happen to any of them too often. So the next thing is they have to have protection from especially the flying things like the eagles and the egrets that come off of some different places. It's interesting to me that there's some of the places that are the best protection in the river, and I really miss my little pointer, but this one over here to the far right, or my far right, is very deep water. You can kind of see an edge there. I can literally stand on that edge. I'm about ankle deep, and I'd be well over my head if I take another step off. There's a lot of timber and mostly pine that's fallen in the river. Places like this are really good protection because the fish can lie underneath that and not only have protection, but they get a certain amount of comfort from the fact that because the current on the top is faster than the bottom, they can stay in those things, and it breaks the current for them. So it's easier for them to stay. And of course, when there's riffles on the water, and there's not a lot of places like this particular one, but there are spots. This actually happens to be right in the, along by the hatchery. The one thing that's important to know about all of these different areas is that if there's enough food, the fish will sometimes give up protection to get it. And then comfort is an interesting part of the thing because many people will tell you that comfort may be one of the most important things, if not the most important. Because as the temperature of the water goes up, which it doesn't very much, the level of dissolved oxygen goes down. So in the summer, in some of those real flat areas in the river, the water will start to warm up, and you'll see the fish moving out. There's several places on Fall River down above what's called the tubes or the falls that literally you won't see a fish down there all day. But you go down there at 6 o'clock at night and they're all over the place. There's very, very deep undercut banks on the river. The thing you really need to watch for is if you put 1 foot in one of the holes, you're going to go down all the way to your crotch, and the other leg is going to be up here on top, and it's really tough to get out of those holes. But again, the warmer the water gets, the lower the oxygen gets, and vice versa. So the fish have to be aware of that. Generally speaking, the research that I've done and everybody I've talked to, basically the fish run about a 3 to about a 6 IQ. So obviously they don't think about things, although I think there are those who would believe that they are smarter than we are. My wife has told me a number of times, why do you have so many fly rods if they're stupid? You know, now I have a couple of answers which I won't give out. Some of them have to do with shoes and purses, but you know, we always kind of leave that one alone. Fortunately, they're all up in the upstairs of our house, and she really doesn't know where they're at anymore. So I've been very fortunate in working with the Temple Fork Outfitters Company for, I don't know, probably about 12 or 13 years. And I would have to literally go up and count to see how many fly rods I have. And so many that I don't use. They're just up there in tubes now. But at any rate, that side of point, you know, the fish have to live by their instincts. They don't live by intelligence. The protection is really big too, because again, oops, I went the wrong way. Sorry. So this was about, I want to say about 7 to 10 years ago. They did a Fall River kind of get to know Fall River and the fisheries department. And they did it at the forestry area there in Bend. And I went to it. It was very interesting to go to. I semi felt sorry for the ODFW guy that was there fielding questions because he obviously pulled the short straw. I'm sure none of the upper echelon wanted to go and get beat up for a whole night. But at any rate, you can see a lot of the things that have gone on in Fall River. The key spawning area of the wild brown trout below the falls, it's the key area that most of the spawning going on now, not just the browns, the rainbows also. There's lots of hiking. I don't know anything about people that do birding. I know they look at them and they take pictures of them and they identify them. There's a lot of birds there to do that with. So that's just kind of a general little overview of some of the things that have gone on. This is the one that I feel is really more to the point. The hatchery was actually constructed in 1829. There was 1973. They poisoned the entire river because they believed that there was a disease in it that was going to kill the fish. It wasn't a disease. They killed all the fish and started over again. So one of the arguments that ODF&W uses is, well, there's no native fish. Well, of course there's no native fish. You killed them all. But they tried a number of different things. They tried stocking grayling in there. That was probably the biggest failure that they had. Obviously, the barbless hooks was good. The hatchery was proposed for closure. Many of us wrote many letters to the state to keep that open. There was an organization. It was literally a private organization, and what they wanted to do is shut it down and make it into a fishing camp. You know, and there's a lot of river in there that they would have taken out some great holes. And then again in 202, the fire retardant spill, and that was a huge kill, but it was actually below the hatchery where they killed. I went up there a couple of days after that because we have a summer home we're not in Sun River, we're about 5 miles from Sun River. But I went up there right after that and looked, and you couldn't find a bug. There was absolutely nothing. And to me, probably one of the more interesting things is prior to that, the yellow sallies used to just be thick in the fall. And I've seen very few anymore. They just didn't seem to come back. Sun River Club has put in spawning gravel in different places. If you go into what's called the tubes, or if you go down below the falls, they spent a lot of time trying to get spawning gravel into that. And from what I hear, it's working quite good. They did some pit tagging because they were originally bringing the fish from the one on the Metolius. I can't remember the name of it. Yes, yeah. So that was a really great idea. What they found out on that pit tagging was that the fish that they were bringing over from the Metolius were there in the river about a day and a half, and they were catching them down around in the city of Bend. So they were not; those fish were just not working. They were just out of there like a shot. I don't know much about the crane bows. I've yet to catch one in there, but they say they're in there. I generally catch rainbow. Once in a while, I just love it if I pick up a brook trout, because I don't know if you know how much ODF&W does not like brook trout. They really would like you to catch them and kill them, and I won't do it. I think they've got to be one of the prettiest fish, if not one of the most fun fish to catch. When my daughters were little, we'd go up there and we'd go into the campground, and I'd take one at a time, and we'd go out, and there was a log across, and it was just full of brook trout. And we'd go in there, and we'd hook one, and my daughter would reel it up, and I'd carry her to the bank and take the other one out. And we could just do that all day long almost until I gave out. So the lower river fishing regulations have been changed quite a bit. The thing they've changed that was a good move was they were letting you fish the whole river year round. They've changed that now to back at the falls. I believe it closed October 1, so you can't fish below the falls. Personally, I like fishing below the falls because not many people want to hike down there. They would much rather stay up on the flatlands and hook some fish. But that's kind of the story of Fall River. To me, some of the things they've done up there have been just literally stupid. But I guess, it's like everything else. You got to try it and find out if it doesn't work. I did get to spend some time with the guys at the hatchery about a year ago. I was up there and it was cold and snowy, and I decided I didn't want to fish. So I just went in and got to look at the spawning. So what they're doing now is they're bringing fish from the Metolius into Fall River, and they recondition them to go into Fall River. And that seems to be relatively successful. I think, personally, the downside of this whole thing has been that I believe they overstocked Fall River. When I started fishing and really got into fly fishing, got really interested in it, what I found is that you really had to be pretty good, or you could go down there and you'd swear up and down there wasn't a fish in the whole Galdarn River. But there's always been a lot of fish. But nowadays, I think recently they just stocked it for the third time. When I was up there last year, the one day I was there fishing, I came down, and you can, in the winter, if you're going to fish it, you want to fish it up high. That's where the fish move. In the summer, they start spreading out. But during the winter, they're all up high because that's biggest spring, and most of the little springs are all coming in there. So that's where they tend to be. So I was down there, and I decided, oh, I'm sorry, I forget that. Sorry. So I was down there fishing, and I was noticing, I just bought at the Albany show, there was a guy that was selling a little 6-foot Fenwick. It was called a Mosquito. It was like I think it was probably a better 2-weight, but I think it said 3-weight or something on it. So I was down there just fishing dry flies, which is what I often do, because if I don't catch anything, I don't care that much. But there were people on the other side that were able to wade across. That's another issue for me now, is wading has become a little bit more of an issue than it used to be. But they were on the other side. We throw indicators, right? They throw bobbers, great big bobbers, and they're catching fish like crazy. And several of them they looked like steelhead. They had to be the trophy fish. And there was never a trophy fish in Fall River. If you caught a big fish once in a great while, you were pretty darn lucky. But these were just hogs that these people were catching. And honestly, I was just kind of disappointed that that's what it's come to. You really don't have to be that good to catch fish on Fall River. You do kind of have to know where they're at, because there are sections where there are just no fish. But, oh, darn it. Let's see. I'm okay. But other than that, Fall River it's an absolutely gorgeous river to fish. It's always fun to be there. They do have a nice campground. If you're there, you really want to take your mosquito repellent, because they're good. They're big ones, and they really like to sting you. My wife and I were pretty broke when we got married. like really broke. So we were both in college. I was in graduate school. She was an undergraduate. And my dad loaned us his camper because we couldn't really afford to have a motel or anything. So we went up and stayed at Fall River for a few nights and decided that after about 2 nights that the mosquitoes, we couldn't get them out of his camper. And so we decided to give up on that and went home. But at any rate, there's good mosquito hatch. So the different places on this river, there's all kinds of places you're going to find fish, but there's also a lot of places you won't. Like this particular one up here in the top right hand, you're not going to find much of anything in there during the day. As you know, I think you were talking about the sun coming out. When the sun hits this, there's just nobody there. You know, you might, if you want some casting practice, it's a good place to practice, but you're not likely going to catch fish. This is another area. The water's very smooth. It's very clear. You can see right to the bottom here. And those fish will come into a feeding lie mostly when there's enough feed in there, enough things are hatching for them to be willing to give up that protection that they really so dearly need to go fishing. So you can see the guy's shadow back here. Actually, if it was a better picture, you could actually see the shadow of his line up there. And I watched him for probably an hour. He was a good caster. That's about it, but he was a good caster. And places like this, I mean, I'm looking for anywhere where there's some places where there's going to be some insect activity. I've got a pretty good chance in some of these riffles like this. So again, where the greatest activity of food is at, the fish are going to go. And then you've got sheltering lies, and sheltering lies are always kind of an interesting thing to me because fish will literally go into sheltering lies and stay there. But what I've found on most rivers, at least that are like Fall River, once you hook a fish and you tag them a little bit, they're not coming back for a while. You're kind of wasting your time if you just stand there and keep casting to them because they're going to run to these sheltering lies, and they all have one of their own, and they all know where it's at. So as soon as you hook the fish, if you know the river fairly well, you'll probably almost know exactly where that fish is going to run. If they get off, they get down there, they just close their mouth. They're not interested in hitting anything for a while. So you're kind of wasting your time. And again, they're never far away from the place that they want to go to hide. Sometimes there's food in there. Sometimes there isn't. But anytime they feel threatened, and especially on a river like Fall River, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is when they get spooked, they go hide. The biggest fish, you probably wonder, why do the big fish make it and the little fish, because the big fish really are more afraid than the little fish. The little fish will come up and hit anything. The big fish are going, I don't think that not a good one. So always try to look. There are many crevices in between rocks, the underlying ledges. There's tons of them on Fall River. And sometimes submerged logs, sometimes undercut banks, but you want to know where those are at. So so where the fish will run, this is a really nice section right here because I showed it in one other slide, but you can literally, this is at the hatchery, you can literally stand on that edge and it's just hugely deep right there. But sometimes you'll find places like this and they'll just tuck back in. They can almost at times be a prime lie, which gives them everything they need, but oftentimes they can become a sheltering lie. This is a pretty good picture of a prime lie because it really provides everything the fish need. So they need comfort. They're getting it from the water's coming through and it's a pretty normal temperature for them, but it's also being broken by every log that's across the water so they don't have to work so much to stay there. There's food coming down through it. They can lay, am I standing in your way? Oh, okay. There's food coming down through them so they can lie in those lies like this, slide out, take some food, slide back in. I've actually, believe it or not, I put quite a few fish in that little triangle there and very seldom land them. They usually get into a log. I think they know their own logs and they just head for those logs. But the prime lies, that's the spot where everything that they need is there. When I did some guiding and teaching for a local guide in the Portland area, I used to meet at a fly shop and we do what I called, it was an on-ground presentation. We'd go through a lot of information. Then we'd usually meet on the Deschutes at Henry's, which is not there anymore, and either do a boat run or a walk and wade. And we'd walk down the river. And having been a professor to college, and I oversaw all of our student teachers, I always asked them when they were going to teach a lesson and they finished, I'd say, you know, what went well? And they might have some kind of an answer. What I'd force them into is being specific. Why did the lesson go well? What did you do that made that lesson go well? And if it was a bad lesson, we'd go the other side. What did you do that made that lesson not go well? So I did the same thing in our walk and wade guide trips. As we'd be walking down and I'd start asking people, tell me a spot you want to fish. Well, I think this is good. Okay, well then tell me why. And so it was really valuable to them. I was trying to assist them in evaluating what was good and what was bad and why was it good and bad. So that worked really well with that. And that's what we were really looking for, were the prime lies. You know, if it wasn't, well, we might, you know, oftentimes they'd fish it anyway. If they hooked one, so be it, I was wrong. If they didn't, then why do you think, what was the problem with fishing that particular thing? Most of the time, if they were fishing things, there was probably drag was the biggest problem that most of the people would have. So here's a good picture on Fall River of a prime lie. And I don't know, has anybody got an idea what on that picture makes it a prime lie? Comfort, protection, food. Okay, don't everybody speak at one time. Raise your hand. No. Pretty much all of them, especially the log that's coming across. It's way undercut. He's standing just barely in the water, but these banks are undercut back in here. That's way undercut back there in those weeds. And so that was a really good place to find fish. And Dave did quite well there that day. So midges are always in the river. I mean, I don't think that's a secret by any means, that no matter where you go, you're going to find probably midges. So within that, the patterns that I've found that worked the best on Fall River were the ones, the little black with the ice cream cone midge in black and in red. Sometimes blue worked pretty well. I'm not sure why, but it does. And then a Griffith gnat seems to be, to me, if I'm going to start seeing things coming off the top, I'm going to go to a Griffith gnat. And I usually tie them, I think I started about an 18 and go down to 22. But the 22s, I'm almost at the point where I'm going to have to buy. They're getting really small. I think they've made, you know, it's like you go out to dinner, right? And you think, well, I paid $50 for that dinner. Dang it, I'm still hungry. You know, or you go to the grocery store. When my wife sends me to the grocery store, she said, well, how did you spend that much money? I don't know. I didn't get much, so I don't know anymore. But it's kind of the same thing with the midges. You know, the hooks just keep getting smaller and my eyes get worse. At any rate, what I'm trying to say is if I'm out there and I'm fishing one of those, the Griffith gnat, and I'm not hooking fish, if I'm getting some fish that are coming up looking, I will trim the bottom of it off, get it to sit further into the film, and that will usually be the difference. If that's not it, then I go smaller and just go and keep going down. But there's a great midge population there, and the ice cream cone midge seems to always be a winner. I think almost no matter where you go. Fishing the lakes up in Central Oregon now, when I do that, we're usually fishing indicators and something like that.
Is that mid 18 too, or not the Griffith gnat?
The Griffith gnat?
The front.
The pupa?
Yeah.
This one.
The one in the center.
One in the center. It's probably an 18. I don't know what I can't remember what I tied it as, but probably 18. I tie them from about 14 down. Sometimes in some of the lakes, you start to see more like the Canadians talk about the bombers. You'll see some bigger ones, but I must have, I would say at least 150 to 200 different patterns that have kind of mixed up in there. Because it just, every once in a while, something doesn't work and just keep trying. This is another really important part of Fall River, is you are a predator too. And I think sometimes we forget that we're predators. I've seen people out on Fall River with the most beautiful, bright yellow shirts you can imagine. And they don't seem to think that's a problem. Now, I've learned that you want to think about the colors. So, you know, if you're fishing out on a bright sunny day and the sky is blue, you probably need to be more on blue. But on Fall River, now you don't have to go like, you know, some of the guys at the shows that wear complete camel. But you definitely want to have some of those colors on, the greens and the browns and the drab colors. So if I'm fishing Fall River, I'm not only doing the colored thing, but quite often, and I don't think I have a picture of that in here, but quite often I'm low crawling up to the bank because of the fact that there's a 10-degree angle that the fish can, they don't necessarily see you as a person, but they see you as something is not, that shouldn't be there. So I'm very cautious in that oftentimes I'll just crawl up to the banks. So then the other thing, you want to be able to locate your own prey. So look around. I mean, a lot of times you'll start to see some fish rolling or doing something. That's really important. You want to know their habitat and their habits. You want to start to learn more about what those fish are doing. And there's a lot of ways to do that. A specific one is just looking and watch, see what they're doing. See if you can figure out a rhythm of where they're going. You want to be careful when I say watch the selected prey and ignore others. I tend to have a habit of, if I'm fishing a fish over here and I see this really nice fish over here out of my peripheral, pretty soon I'm over here. And then that one doesn't come up again, so I'm back here. You really want to concentrate on a fish and make an effort to get that fish. I mean, there's so many fish in there right now, you could probably go crazy. Also being stealthy. I never have looked that up in the dictionary, but I think it's a word. I know stealth is, and I think stealthy is. So, you know, being really quiet, moving quietly, when you're walking around, not pounding your things on the ground, you walk stick and things like that. So the anatomy of a river, Fall River and all rivers, has got to do with the gradient, how steep the bottom is, and the depth of the water. So this is pretty typical structure in Fall River. There's a lot of this with the weeds coming through here. There's a lot of it like that that's just wide open. And then there's areas like that that are cut and real deep. So on Fall River, when we start looking at riffles, we have to define them. Number one, they are the steepest part of that section of the river. They have to have some irregular bottom to be able to cause this tumbling of the water and re-oxygenating. So oftentimes, if I'm on Fall River, one of the first places I'll go will be down to an area like down in here just below it, or casting right into it. There was a pattern that used to work really well on Fall River. It was, and I don't remember the guy, I know he's passed away, the guy that made it, but it was called a little rainbow trout. And that it was on a silver hook. Boy, that was just a killer to throw into spots like that. But that's the kind of thing, that's what, you know that those are riffles. I like to fish indicators, not always on Fall River. Oftentimes I won't fish an indicator, but if you are, I recommend that you think about putting tippet rings on it. Is anybody that doesn't know what a tippet ring is? Okay, so I started, I was fishing with a friend of mine and he got me hooked on the tippet rings because they are a 2mm solidly welded. You can't go to the Bi-Mart and buy the ones that have the little pinchers that kind of go together. Those will just cut your line. But I put a tippet ring on, about 18 inches of tippet, and then attach my fly, and I may attach 2 flies. I have some kind of indicators up here that I use sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think I would much rather just use a dry fly or something like that. So this is another area in here. So this is like a run, and typically a run, actually this right there where it says posted, that's where the guy starts yelling at you. It's just about, if you get close to his sign, he'll come out of his house over there and start yelling. But this is really a nice section because you've got a riffle coming into a run, and it's just the perfect area in here. You can see all the weeds. There's always a lot of fish being able to lie in a place like this. They typically don't have big rocks, and they typically are not very steep, because if they were, then they would be a riffle. The hopper dropper is probably my favorite way of fishing Fall River nowadays, and I like to use the foam patterns like little hoppers or anything that's got foam on it. And oftentimes, you might pick up a fly on that. Then you've got a nymph attached to it. I will still have my tippet ring. I use the tied to the bend of my hook. Some people don't. I don't find that it makes a lot of difference for me personally. So that's kind of the way I do that. And then you have flats in the river, and this is a typical flat. I mean, there's a lot of this river is just one big flat, and that has very little current. It's almost, if you want to start thinking about it, it would almost be like thinking about fishing a lake. There's very little current in there. The water doesn't move very well, and the fish are very spooky. They have to be because there's not much protecting them. You can see the sun's hitting over here. You can see all the way down into the weeds. That's tough for fish to want to be in a spot like that. The flats can be pretty productive, especially if you're getting a good hatch. There's a lot of mayflies that come off on Fall River, and when they start coming off, these flats can be just come alive in the evenings. This is another one. It's hard to see them, but I can't. My pointer doesn't work, but you can see a couple of fish in there. Oftentimes, people will go on Fall River, and because the fish have an ability to change, kind of like a chameleon, if they're in the same substrate for a long enough time, they're going to begin to take on some of that look, which helps them camouflage. And there's actually, if you don't see them, there's one right there, and then there's one right up there coming that way. There's actually one back in there, but you can't really hardly see it. But they can get pretty camouflaged in there, and that's oftentimes, sorry, got away from the mic again. That's oftentimes when, people will come down to Fall River and say, they used to a lot, and come down and say, there's just no fish in this river. And they're right. In certain places, I have fished for at least 50 years. I've never seen a fish in a couple of spots. This is one of my favorite places to fish, and this is down, it's called the tubes. There's a section above the tubes and below the tubes. I love fishing the section up. I could almost consistently, between those two logs out to the right of me, almost always pick up a fish in there in the evenings. And in here, you really have to be careful again of those undercut banks, because they're really soft. And I mean, you can go through them, and I've seen people, especially on the other side, they're even worse in terms of having some holes. I mean, you stick your wading stick clear down to the bottom, and you just hit the bottom. So there's caddis. There's a lot of caddis in Fall River. Most of the caddis you're going to see are your case caddis. There's some green rockworms, but very seldom. I've seen a few, or at least found a few of the net spinning caddis in the river. And basically, when if you're fishing Fall River and you're fishing elk hair caddis or deer hair caddis, you're probably imitating just about everything that's on there. Just take a look at the color of the body and maybe switch that. Fishing the pupa up there and some of this larva down, or the larva and the pupa, always a good idea. I would recommend, I know that there's a shop in Sun River called The Hook, and there's one across the street in the business park, and they're nice people in both of those shops. They will tell you what's going on. I oftentimes will consult with them to see what's been happening, because I don't fish it as much as I used to. This happened to be September 11th, 2001, when we got attacked, and I was standing out there that night fishing and had no idea what was going to happen in the middle of the night. And for that, I would say thank you to anybody that's a veteran. My asthma kept me out of the Army. I thought they'd take anybody in Vietnam, but obviously I'm living proof they didn't want me. That stoneflies, there used to be a lot of the yellow mayfly, yellow sallies that we'd find up there. You don't see many of them now. There's still stoneflies on the river, but they're not. I've never seen them come back as thick as they seem to used to be. When you're approaching the river, I think these are some things you want to do and be very careful of. Selectively wary with a spring creek. Be careful how you position yourself to the trout. Take cover to conceal your approach. Direction and intensity of the wind. A lot of times you're fishing 2 and 3 weights, maybe a 4 weight. I have a little trouble throwing my 2-weight into the wind. It just doesn't go very well. So you want to look for potential casting instructions. I'm always looking for a seam. I'm always looking for some trout feeding somewhere. And I'm always kind of trying to keep my eyes out for, just mostly what's going on out there and what am I seeing that will help me. A careful approach. These guys are standing off of the bank, but literally if this first one took a step out more, he'd be in the river. He'd be in the mud going down. So you really want to think about that and think about your approach when you're wading. Fall River is one of those places where if you're wading downriver, you're always collecting some dust and sediment, and you may be, even if you're lucky, sending some insects down to the fish. But for the most part, I tend to wade upriver because the sound doesn't go up, and the water that I'm kicking up, whatever it is, no matter how careful I wade, no matter how careful I do things, there's still silt going down. And again, like I say, these fish live by instinct. And when that's coming down, something's not right. Mayflies, there's a lot of mayflies on there, mostly blue-winged olives that I find up there. But, there's probably some, I don't know what else. I don't pay too much of attention. What I do find is that I like to fish the pheasant tail nymphs. And if I'm fishing, because there's mayflies on the river, there's basically 4 types. And so you have your swimmers, your clingers, your crawlers, and your burrowers. Most everything you're going to see on Fall River is probably either a swimmer or a clinger. You're not going to see, I'm swimmer or a crawler. You're not going to see too many of the clingers because they tend to be in a lot faster water, and they're able to somehow anatomically hang on to the bottom. The burrowers are like your hexagenia. I'm sure there's no hexagenia in there. But you want to think about when you're fishing there that if you're fishing something like, let's say, one of the mayflies that might be a crawler, you probably don't want to fish a pheasant tail because they tend to be more bulky, kind of wide and round and things like that, more like this one up here. Okay, so I'm probably going to fish something more like a hare's ear that's a little bit more round, a little bit heavier, and will go down because these insects, until they start to come off, they're on the bottom. So if you're fishing for something like this, get down on the bottom. If you're fishing for the blue-winged olives, obviously they're going to tend to look more like this because they're a swimmer, and they tend to just kind of swim around. If you happen to get some in your hand and have a little water, they almost look like they're trying to swim because they're trying to create some oxygen down there in your hand. And so things like a pheasant tail, pretty much I tend to not tie too many dry flies anymore that aren't a parachute because I've spent years trying to perfect having the wings just absolutely perfect, and it seems like there's always one that makes it do this. So I've kind of given up. If I want those, I go buy them or I find a kid that'll tie them for me. So, but to me, I like the parachutes better. They always sit in the water. They always sit a little lower. So that's kind of the whole thing of as far as those go. The Secret River, if you've been a steelhead fisherman, you've probably crossed it at one time or another. I spent many years through high school and even into my adult life fishing steelhead. And the first thing I learned was when you get out there at O Dark 100, you can't really see. There's brush in front of you, and you're walking through it to get out to that hole you want to be, and you see a steelhead just flash right out of there. That's the Secret River. So the idea is when you're fishing, this young man, I had to take a picture of him because I knew he had to be freezing. He's in tennis shoes or something, but I mean, he just looked cold. So at any rate, he's back in here, and he's fishing in real close to begin with and then working his way out. And Fall River is definitely a stream to do that on because I've seen, I have one example of a lady that I worked with one time, and she had all new Orvis stuff. I'm sure that her vest and everything was Orvis, and she was bound and determined to find out if those waders leaked. So she had to get out in the river. As soon as she did, she spooked a couple of fish, and that was what I was trying to tell her. Stand on the bank. It's like, I guess if you spend $800 on a pair of waders, you got to find out if they leak. So she did. They didn't. But that's the whole idea of the secret river. Fish in and then work your way out. We did a lot of work with TU up there about 8 or 9 years ago, and there's still quite a bit of it actually that's left. We went through and we destroyed a lot of camping areas where people were illegally camping, and that was before the homeless ever, became a big deal. But they were camping in a few spots up there, and so we destroyed those, hauled them out of there, planted a lot of willows and things in the river to try and build up some more habitat for fish. And TU's done a great job continually trying to upgrade those things. And as you go along Fall River, you'll see a lot more of them now where you can see where people have started to try to clean up. We've tried to get people to use a path down to the river instead of going right through and breaking everything down. This was the riparian project that we worked on. This Derek Staub was from TU. He worked with Oregon State Parks and Rec, and we spent a lot of time, probably, I don't know, better part of a week in different sections going through and trying to repair and clean up some of the things. There's a hatchery there, and again, like I said, they tried to buy it, but fortunately they withheld, and they still have it. There's a nice place there to go and shelter. There's nice restrooms, or nice clean restrooms. You go in there and fish, you have to be out by, I believe, 5 or 7 now. I can't remember what it is. And that really kind of irritated me because I used to like to go in just about the time they closed and fish the river. Now you can't do that anymore. This was a young man that was fishing there one day, and that was what he was using, just kind of a brown hackle peacock, which I don't know if anybody ties those anymore other than me. But he caught that fish. You could not have pried that fish out of that kid's hand. He jumped on his bicycle and headed home with that fish. That one was going. I don't know how well it ate, but boy, I'll guarantee you that kid was really proud of that fish. This is an area at the hatchery that also fishes very well. There's a place there called Ed's Hole, and a lot of people fish it. It seems to be harder now to get into the hatchery to fish, but if you can get in there and it's not too crowded, it's pretty good fishing in there. You can look up at the ponds and dream about the ones that are about like this that are swimming around in there, and but that's a good area to fish. The whole area throughout the hatchery I would highly recommend if you can get in there without a lot of people. This is the old Montgomery cabin. It's no longer there, but it was a place that was built there. As I understand the history, they ran either turkeys or pigs through there. And when you're on the river, you'll see just up above it in kind of that same area by the tubes, there's a pretty deep kind of a little swallow in there. My understanding is that was where they shipped things down the river, which in that sense, theoretically would make it legal that you could wade to the high water mark. Now, I personally don't want to get arrested to find out if I'm right or wrong. So I go to other places, but there's nothing left of this. But this was probably 50 years ago when I took that picture. This right up here in this kind of middle where those trees are standing, and it kind of ducks in up in there, that's the confluence of the Deschutes. That is a really good place to fish because you can't fish below the falls, but you can fish the Deschutes. And oftentimes you can get in there. You could probably go in with a pontoon boat. I don't think you'd have much trouble rowing out of there. I just run my boat up there and anchor and literally cast into that cool, because it really lightens up the water as it comes into the Deschutes. It's very clear up there. And oftentimes you can hook some pretty nice fish right up in that area. This is my neighbor, and his son caught that fish, not him. Dave just took the picture of him holding it. But he has a house right on the river that he was able to grandfather his house in because it used to be one of the lodges on the river. So he could build right on the concrete footing, and it's a beautiful place. And that's like probably the biggest fish that I've ever seen taken out of there. And many of them that I'm seeing now, people fishing, they're hooking fish that big. This is the falls. My little Mickey fin down there was always a good pattern to cast right up into the white water and just let it swing out. That my friend is a big-time Euro nympher, and he does really well in their Euro nymphing. I don't, because I can't stand up well enough to stand in the water that I should be. So I mostly still cast into there, but this is where it closes right now this time of year. So you can't fish below that. I love to fish below it during the year when it's open, because you got to walk in and you see a whole lot less people. These are just a few pictures of the river. There's a lot of places like this where you just, almost every place there's logs that have fallen. And those present great places for fishing. There's a number of springs that enter the river. This is way upriver, almost to the headwater. Then obviously some etiquette, and there's a lot of people seemingly that don't have much that come in there now. You know, so I just put this up for that reason only. Some good places to check are, currently there's a lot of stuff on YouTube about Fall River, which kind of is upsetting to me, because they're really telling you a lot of places to go. The Hook Fly Shop is in the village. Fin and Fire is in the business park. A couple of books I would really suggest you read is the one by John Sheely and the one by Mike Lawson. If you're into reading books about things, those are excellent books. This is just a trail that goes up, and this is my information. So if you're going to go up to Fall River next week or next year and you think of something you want to know, you can email me at Hot Fall River Fly Fishing, although Tim can't, but everybody else apparently can. Tim and our emails don't like each other. So you could email me. You can call me on the phone if you've got a question, but please understand, tell me why you're calling, because I haven't gone to jail for not paying my taxes yet. You know, although this year isn't over yet. I don't need another warranty on my relatively new truck, but they offer them every day. And so usually I don't answer anything on the phone anymore. But if you call and say, hey, I'm going to Fall River and I got a question, I promise you I will get back to you. And that, if you want to get a picture of this or so, if you're interested, or Tim's got it for you, if you want anything. But thank you very much for coming out. I hope I didn't keep you too long. It was definitely a challenge to get this to put together. One thing I would like to share, sit here, as an advertisement. I have written one book called The Art and Science of Angling with a Fly and a Rod, and it's about reading and fishing moving water. You can buy it through Amazon if you're interested. I think they charge $12 for it. It's probably not going to go on the bestsellers list. I'm not sure if they've ever sold any. They might have sold a few, but if you're interested in it, a lot of what I talked about up here is also in there. Thank you.
No, it's okay.
Before you step down, does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Yeah, it's
The question is, what is pit sampling?
actually my hearing aids are on, so I could even hear him. Most often they aren't.
Yeah.
That tagging is just a way of tagging them so that they can electronically trace them. That's all it is. And they were tracing them down all the way into Bend within a day or so. I mean, they were not at all happy in that cold water.
Question is, why do you like the tippet ring?
Well, for several reasons. One, okay, I go into this fly shop and I buy a 9-foot 4X, right? And I decide I'm going to fish that leader. Okay, so now pretty soon I'm coming along here and that fly isn't working, and then the next one isn't working, and the next one, and now I'm down to about an 8-foot 3X. So by putting the tippet ring onto the 9-foot 4X, I then add tippet material. As the tippet material gets cut off, I shorten it up, cut it off, and put a new piece of tippet on. But that 9-foot 4X doesn't change over a long period of time. The only thing I have found about the tippet rings, it's a bit of a disadvantage. I had my oldest granddaughter out with me one day, and we were on Trillium Lake, and she was just knocking them dead. I wasn't doing much, but she was doing really well. And the third fish she hooked was about like what Dave had. It was a big fish, and it broke her off. and it broke off right there at the tippet ring. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then it dawned on me, those two fish before that have been working that leader on that ring and creating friction. And so now what I do is if I fish for a while, I automatically just cut the tippet off, throw it away, and put on a new piece of tippet. She was not happy. Although she's at Boise State now, and I keep telling her, you got to date the fly fishermen. Stay away from the stinking football players.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well,
What size tippet was the question?
number one, I always go 1x smaller than what, if I've got a 9-foot 4x, my tippet will always be 1x smaller. Just because rather than losing the whole shebang, it's going to break that tippet off. So depending on where I'm at, but on Fall River, usually 5x. Sometimes if things are going poorly, that's one of the first things, if I'm not doing anything, not doing well, that's one of the first things I change is go to it because it is so stinking clear. And even with, I use really good, expensive fluorocarbon, they're still going to see that leader some. So I just will go some, that's one, if I'm going to start changing flies, changing tippets is going to be in there right along with it.
Anyone else?
Talking about memories on Fall River is my first pair of waders. It was on Fall
Did
River.
you wade in them?
Yes.
There
That
you
was
go.
the first
Waders.
time
Did they
I
leave?
used them. Huh?
Did they leave?
Oh, I was too scared to go outside. I saw the fish though.
Yeah.
They were just there.
Yep. But they're there a lot of times. Anything else? Yeah.
If we were gonna have a club outing there,
Questions, what's the best time to do a club outing in the
I
fall?
would probably tend to go actually probably the best time is dead winter. But you're probably not going to be camping up there a lot in dead winter. So I would probably go up in May, or I'd wait till around September. Midsummer, it's not that the fishing would be all that much more difficult, but the crowds, once school's out, it's like they just invade the area. So I would try and kind of keep myself on the outside of schools.
Okay, everyone check out our raffle. Give about 10 minutes and we'll do the raffle. But thank you very much for the presentation. I learned quite a bit. I had never fished that fishery.